It's estimated that 1 in 6 children nowadays have a developmental challenge or disorder.
Movement's changed, nutrition's changed, social interactions and interaction in the environment changed. That will then have a consequence.
And can you imagine a child being told, and parents of a child being told, that you're going to be swallowed up in high school? My daughter passed all the GCSEs. She got 2 A's and a B in her A-levels, and she's off to university.
Your brain kind of thinks that you're still a baby in a way. If some of these primitive reflexes are still active.
Yeah, we can change this. It's not fixed. Our children are not fixed.
In a more sedentary world overflowing with screens, stress and processed foods, our brains are under constant pressure, especially those of our children. Brains Under Attack is a podcast that exposes modern environments and teaches us how to build healthy brains in an unhealthy world. Welcome, everyone, to the first ever BrainX pod. I'm joined with Steve P. I'm Steve M. And Seb Kane's also on the call. And we are the team behind BrainX Movement. It's a company that is dedicated to human development, specifically the neurological development of children. Now, at the heart of it, we're just 3 dads who asked a big question: what is going on in our children's brains? And more importantly, how do we help them socially, emotionally, physically, and academically? Developmental disorders are on the rise, and they're rising at an alarming rate. And it's estimated that 1 in 6 children nowadays have a developmental challenge or disorder. But we have some good news. Clever scientists have worked out how to build a healthy brain. You can, in your own homes, help your children to achieve better outcomes. And it all comes from understanding how that brain works of ours and how to improve it if it goes off track. Now, I'm joined here with co-founder of BrainX Movement. We've got Seb Kane on the call, and we'll get to him later on the podcast. He's the father of BrainX Movement. His journey, his incredible journey at the beginning, sparked the understanding for all of us to learn from. But I'd like to introduce Steve Peters, who's been in neuroscience for a long period of time. What's the history of why you got into this crazy world of neuroscience, mate?
Yeah, it's an amazing world. I have worked with children for the past 30 years, starting in primary schools, and then went into secondary schools, both in state schools and independent schools as well, mainly in PE departments, in the sporting environment, helping children move effectively, enjoy sport and enjoy movement. One of the major things that I've seen probably in the last decade or so is how our children are probably not moving quite as well as they used to en masse. Some children move really well, but en masse, they don't seem to be moving and have coordination as balance as well as we used to. That coincided with me meeting the wonderful Seb probably a decade ago now, just under a decade ago now, where he introduced a little bit more to me around the science of brain development. And actually, we cannot separate how the body moves to then how the mind is working and how we are academically. And actually, it empowered me more to realize how important movement is. It's way more important than playing a game of football or rugby or cricket or lacrosse or netball or whatever. It's way bigger than that. Actually, it supports the development of a child. So movement is first. And through the understanding that Seb's dropped to me, and then my own learnings now, and going into clinical, being a clinical practitioner and helping and supporting children, we have to recognize that our brain doesn't just happen; it's built. So we've got to help that being built, and we've got to initially do that through movement and stability and coordination and rhythm and timing. And if we don't do that, ultimately we will then start to see consequences later down the line. So hopefully through this pod, I'm super excited about actually supporting and helping children. I work with lots of schools now, working en masse with children, explaining to head teachers and staff and then parents and then the children how important movement is, and we've got to get that right. That's changed in schools a little bit at the moment. Now our children are moving less in schools, so we need to give them the information that we know as a company, and it's the information's out there, the science is out there. We haven't made this science up; the science is out there, but we've collated it, we've collected it, we've put it together as a foundation to then go and support parents. And so that's I present to lots of people now, and one of the major things we get on the back of those presentations is, wow, we can actually support more than what's actually happening at the moment, and our children's brains are not fixed, like ours are not fixed. So we've got to link in the information, the science, and then give them practical examples, opportunities for our children to develop. The brain has to develop. It doesn't just happen. So that's the really exciting bit, that I think if we can get that right as a group, and then hopefully support parents and teachers and schools to then give our children that opportunity to build their brain successfully, and we have to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, super excited. We will get onto this later on. One of my major passions now, and this is through Seb, is primitive reflexes. So we're going to talk about that later. So that's one thing that I don't think most people in the UK even have heard it's a thing. No. But it's a crucial thing that we need to know about, and our children need to know about, and parents and staff at schools need to know about it, and it's super, super important. So yeah, super excited. This is an amazing opportunity. We've been building this for a number of years now, that we want to support and help, and through knowledge. And we're not going to preach at people. We're not going to say you have to do things. We're just going to give information, and hopefully there might be a few light bulb moments for other practitioners, schools, parents. Actually, we can help.
But it's interesting to talk about that information, Seb. We're going to get to you very soon. It's but you've seen firsthand the transformations that have happened based on actually understanding how the brain develops, where to plug this information is.
Yeah.
Exercise programs and all the rest of it. We've seen firsthand. It's not just studying, looking at research, looking at books, Seb. You've been doing this. It's a good segue to Seb. You've been doing this for many years. Started 18 years ago. Fantastic, amazing story, and uplifting story about you and your family and Sarah, and also how many children you've helped along the way. Like Seb is known as the witch doctor for the brain up in Sheffield. It's like, you go to that man if you're feeling down, if you're feeling distressed, or your children are struggling with any disorders. So Seb, over to you, buddy. Where did it all come from? How did it all happen?
I think the inspiration predominantly, first and foremost, was being a father. I've got 4 kids, 4 children, and the inspiration predominantly began because of my 2 daughters. Erin, who was 7, got diagnosed with dyslexia, and Sarah was then born with Down syndrome not long after. And I think it was a system that I faced that purely put limitations on what was possible, but without any real solutions. And I think that's when, from a background of sport and exercise kinesiology, understanding how this brain and body isn't separate allowed me to then delve deeper, ask questions to the people that I needed answers to, because it didn't make sense because of the limitations. And there was no real solutions for growth. And I think that's where the neuroscience came into play, and the research. And then you delve into brain development yourself. You then look at neuroplasticity, you look at the modern science, and just how much of it is really regressed in clinical practice. And it was, I had a platform where I was a clinician. I've been in this industry over 20 years in rehab, and the incredible advancements or growth the brain can wire into, and skills it can develop, yet we limit children from such a young age. And I thought, as a father, I've got an absolute responsibility, and it's a burden I've taken upon myself to bring children to this world, to be responsible to hopefully give them a future that they are morally obliged to as well, to live their best life, to access their potential. And for someone to tell me that this is the way, or I'm going to reduce your child to this because of this, just didn't make sense to me when you look at the modern science and the growth in neuroscience as well.
Yeah.
So
you
now
didn't
I'm currently
believe in the
so
restrictions, that
I
were
don't
placed on
believe in a lot of the limitations
limitations. Yeah.
in neurological or psychological, because I've done some remarkable things with people, and it's not because I'm just special or I'm magic. It's just this belief in people as well to go, look, there is a way you can improve, because we've got nothing to lose anyway. We're still struggling. We're coming from a place of weakness, but a place of weakness gives us a signal that we can strengthen up. And it's giving them that opportunity to go, listen, this is where everyone starts. We don't have the ability to walk, talk, read, or write. They're weaknesses. The same way someone who's never stepped foot in the gym, they've got to start at a point of weakness. But it's the only way we can recognize and accept that we are weak.
And it's not
But
quick.
there's also an opportunity that we
yeah.
can grow. Yeah.
There's no, it's not going to happen overnight either. It's
No,
understanding
absolutely not.
that it takes time to build pathways and it takes time to learn these skills. You were thrown in the deep end with your second child, and that's when the neuroscience really started to hit home with you, and you started to delve into the research and understanding what was going on in her brain. You talk to us a little bit about your second child, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. So Sarah, she was wearing glasses. She had really limited vision. She had really limited hearing, had to have hearing aids. So when they're born, the pediatrician, they do tests for the senses, visual, they do primitive reflex, but it's very, very mild. And I didn't know anything about any of this until I delved deeper. And I started studying neuroscience. But now I'm conducting my own research in schools to try and pass it on. But with Sarah, it was significant. And I would always say Sarah was quite a blessing, because I think if Sarah never had happened, I'm not sure it would have ever encouraged me to pursue this next level of learning in neuroscience. So I see it as an absolute blessing for Sarah to come into this world, to give me the opportunity to learn all these amazing things about our senses. And that's when I delved into primitive reflexes, which was never mentioned by any health professional. No amount of nutrition was encouraged, healthy eating, hydration. No amount of exercise, movement was encouraged. It was constant limitations. The worst case scenario, which I'm all for. I think it's good to have a worst case scenario, but there's also the option to have best case scenario, and there's also the option to see things as they are. So I've seen things as they were, and then the goal was, is there a possibility that I can make this better? And then that's when I discovered primitive reflexes. I discovered the vestibular system. I discovered proprioceptive systems. So there was many more senses than just the 5 that most of us are aware of. And that then led to developing Sarah's vestibular system, visual eye tracking. It then developed into the proprioceptive systems. And Sarah just began to then develop her eyesight, her vision, eye test scores got significantly better. She no longer needed glasses. Her hearing significantly improved with the vestibular work, along with sound therapy as well. So I think, but none of that was really sort of prescribed. In a sense, there was no solutions for that.
You had to
or
work
it was
that
never
out.
mentioned.
You had to work that out for yourself and almost battle against the healthcare professionals.
Yeah, and also look into the research that maybe the health professionals aren't aware of, because I think academic education also limits research as well, because it's directed into, I'm after this result and this is the way I can get it, where there's all this other researchers out here that most people wouldn't have really heard of. And I just delved and looked into the results that some of these researchers were creating. And I just took some of their research, and for example, with the visual system, I took Dr. Jacob Lieberman's work. And if no one's ever read the book, if you wear glasses, it's one of the books I would definitely recommend for everyone, and it's called Take Off Your Glasses and See. And he gives amazing step-by-step, but he also links it. And what I like about him is he links the possible emotional aspects to it as well. So it's more of a holistic approach. And that was the way I was sort of taught with my sport and exercise kinesiology as well, that posture is linked to the nervous system. It's not always just a muscular problem. It's a whole system problem, and it's a software we've got to decode. And neuroscience is pretty much the same with neuroplasticity now. And now we have even further than that going to genes, epigenetics, so which complements the polygenetics that most people are sort of aware of.
So
but
many
I think,
theories that we're going to touch on. We'll
yeah,
expand on each of these, and you know, the
yeah,
whole point of this podcast is chuck people into the deep end,
yeah,
talk about all these
absolutely, yeah,
concepts, and then we'll unpack all of these
Yeah.
as we go. I think that's the important thing.
yeah.
Because I think
And
that's really important, where we've got to, we're going to talk about epigenetics and primitive reflexes and vestibular system, but what we are going to do is break it down so that we can all understand it.
Yeah.
Because you can go really deep into science,
Yeah.
it can be really complicated, but actually that's what Seb and myself and Steve, between us all, we're trying to make this more simple.
I'll dumb it down for everyone.
Yeah, so that we can,
all
do it. But ultimately, all the exercises, all the work that you've done with Sarah to improve her vestibular system, her visual system, her hearing system, audio systems, things like that, is through movement, isn't it? And it's through exercises, and it's through pattern recognition and rhythm and all those. It's training,
practice,
yes,
reps.
It's through supporting with education and knowledge, and then it's taking action, because a lot of people are aware of a lot of this, but they don't put it into action, and partly because a lot of people are not taught how to put it into action.
But I think it's one of those, you don't see the instant results, mate, do you?
And we do live in a world where it's quick.
Yeah, where we all want to see results. We all want to see, you know, the magic pill to help us all. We're all, you know, victims of that. But yeah, it doesn't happen quickly. I've done it with my own children and seen, obviously,
Steve,
the progressions.
Yeah, you can get results quick. There's certain we can get results quick. The only problem with that, though, is anything that's quick doesn't really remain in the nervous system. So it's because it's your nervous system, it's your brain, and it's your body, you see. So you're the one who's responsible to train this nervous system of yours. So I can support training it, I can stimulate certain parts, but then the moment you leave and you don't keep that up, it does like a full 360. So the nervous system always knows how to go back to baseline. And if it feels more comfortable at baseline where the dysfunctions are there, but you haven't repped it out for long enough, then the nervous system doesn't train. It's like building a muscle. In order for a muscle to develop to go from 10 press-ups to 30 press-ups, it requires predominantly a longer time. It takes you longer to do 30 than it does 10. 100%. So it's a bit like that. It's you've got to keep training it. And then also, if you stop, you end up with something called synaptic pruning, where then you can't then do the 30 press-ups that you trained a year ago for, that then you've taken a year break from. So then it sort of undoes that work, because now it's focused on adapting to the new repetitions of behavior. So you have to keep it up.
So I think if I just look at how I understood this and how you taught us, and it takes a while for the penny to drop and understand what the important factors here for healthy brain development. Maybe it's a good time to talk about how a healthy brain develops. You know, years and years of evolution, years of history, Mother Nature. How does Mother Nature and evolution expect our brains to develop? How should it be developing? Because we'll talk a bit about the modern world and how the environments are affecting everything and derailing us and pushing us off our optimal path. But how should, from pre-birth all the way through to 10 years old, what, you know, if you were to explain how a healthy brain develops, how would you explain it, or should develop?
So I think it starts off with the parents themselves, the health of the parents. I think that's crucial. So because we're a set of cells in the beginning, and them cells are interacting with the world around them, which is inside predominantly the mother. So the goal would be, at first, like everything, I think a loving, nurtured environment is crucial in developing a healthy brain, because the studies always point, and we now got the ACEs score, you know, a child who goes through stress, let's say, or trauma, adverse childhood experiences, they call them, the brain tends to be a lot less developed in certain areas, especially behavior inhibition. So they struggle for process consequences. So or behavioral inhibition or even empathy. So the goal is we have to develop the brain in a loving and nurturing environment. The health of the parents, the habits of the parents are really important because that's the information that's being passed down. So then what happens then, Steve, is the brain's developing, and it's developing in the way nature is intended, but we want to try and give the environment first the right level of support and stimulation. Nutrition is huge. And when the child comes into this world, or when it's about to go through the birth canal, it performs these two important reflexes. So one of the signs, and the body gives us signs, but one of the signs where if it's a C-section because the child didn't have the ability to push through, then we know there must be some immaturity in the primitive brain, because the primitives, the two reflexes that should have been performed to help through the birth canal, because you can't solely rely upon the mother to keep pushing because it's exhausting. So the brain has this involuntary reflexes to allow for this communication and coordination with the mother to help it with birth and through the birth canal. So they're also signs and symptoms. But then also that doesn't mean that is it. What the sign is we're aware of it. But then when it comes into this world, Steve, then what we do is we can then check them. So it doesn't matter if they've missed them points. The most important thing is we become aware that they've missed them points.
So yeah, just to clarify, if possible, natural births are better for neurological development, is what you're saying. If there's an emergency or a situation where a C-section has to happen, it's commonplace. That's normal. Health of mother, health of baby are a priority. But that's a bit of a red flag from what you've learned and what you understand.
It's a sign. Yeah, it's
a bit of a red flag, and it's looking at all of these factors that contribute to brain development and understanding from day dot all the way through. If something's happened in the history of the parent of the birthing process, we need to pay close attention to this in the early years of life, and maybe have some early interventions and just some extra attention on the development of that baby and that child.
And if it's pre-birth as well, Steve, if parents have unresolved trauma or anything like that, my advice to any parent is make sure you resolve that as well.
Yeah. But what you're not saying is just because a child is born via cesarean, they're destined to have neurological issues.
No, absolutely not, because the
necessarily.
brain's neuroplastic. So it has this ability to still learn and integrate the reflexes.
But that might be a factor. What I'm saying, is what we're saying. At that stage.
What I'm saying is that is a good sign. And I'm not saying all babies with C-sections are doomed. No, not at all. I'm saying it's just the sign and symptom, and it has this ability to develop when it comes into the world for the first time. And then the love and the nurture, the non-verbal cues are then, and the movement and the nutrition is absolutely vital and crucial. And that is predominantly how the brain develops in this love.
And so the baby comes into this world. There's the early years of life. Let's rewind 40, 50, 60, 100 years ago, to where there were less developmental disorders, there were less neurological issues. How would then that baby need to develop to create the healthy connections and the healthy brain development?
Stay as close to nature. Be careful of the artificial world. Engage in you and your child. I think, especially in the first very early years. Listen, I'm not saying screens are terrible, but I think if you look at the science and the research, it always points, like you look at the CDC, you look at the American Pediatric Society, they're all advising to not put your child in front of a screen before certain ages, especially 3, 2, and 1. And there's a reason for that, because the child's brain isn't ready to be stimulated in that way. So when you're talking 20, 30 years ago, technology wasn't advanced or as entertaining to us at that time, because I'm now reaching nearly halfway to 100. So back then we were out riding bikes and we were outside and we didn't have this structured play. We would just play. Now we've got structured play everywhere. We've got these spongy places that kids could go to and we pay for, and everything is predominantly structured. Whereas when we were kids, it was just get out in the garden. You would design your own game with a football or whatever. You would throw a ball. You would do it with your neighbors, who then became your school friends. So we had this way of moving and not being entertained indoors by a screen. I think that's one of the
Another red flag.
environmental domains. Where we go, it's really, really important we become aware of how a child brain develops, but also what influences it to prevent healthy development.
I think that's really important part that we need to touch on in this first podcast, is that our children's brains fundamentally need a few things, don't they, Seb? They need movement. That is a need. It's not an option. It needs to move. It needs good nutrition, and it needs good social interactions and interactions with the environment. That is what develops a child's brain. Now, if you think over the last 30 years, what's changed is our children are moving less than ever before. We know that. That's scientifically proven now. They're moving less than ever before with less natural play. It's like you said, Seb, it's more structured. So they're moving less. We won't go too deep into it on this pod, but we will at some point. Nutrition is not as good as it used to be. There's artificial sugars, sweeteners, dyes, all that kind of stuff. They're even talking about that there's too much artificial sugar and things going in our baby milk and things like that now. So that's another conversation. But nutrition is worse than whatever before. And our children now are socially interacting less than ever before. Families are more further apart now. The world's just got a bit bigger. It used to take a village to raise a child. That old that saying, which is crucial. So families are split up a little bit more. We simply don't go out as much as we used to. Like Seb just mentioned, we've got things that will entertain our children for us now on screens right in front of them. So if you think movement's changed, nutrition's changed, social interactions and interaction in the environment changed, that will then have a consequence.
So what we're saying is, in the modern world, it's difficult to raise a neurotypical child, if that's the right word for it. It's hard with all these influences and everything that sort of derails us, and the causes in the modern world. It's tough, which is why we're seeing so many kids that are struggling with these challenges.
And I think it's important, and we talk about it a lot, that there's a balance to everything. So Peppa Pig, for example, is amazing. Our children should watch a little bit of Peppa Pig. But if they're watching Peppa Pig for 8 hours a day, that's not great for them. If we used to have treats when we were younger, and it used to be I used to have a treat on a Sunday afternoon. We'd have 10 pence and we go get 10 penny sweets. That was on a Sunday afternoon. Well, treats are now, and which is the norm. It's the norm. You pick up from school, children get treats all the time. They have desserts all the time. Even our breakfast that we're feeding our children now, it's a treat. It's all full of sugar and things like that. So we all know that sugar's not great for us, but the world's causing this, not us as parents. We're not blaming ourselves. We're not blaming parents, but we've got to become aware that there's a consequence if we feed our children, whether that's emotionally or through lack of movement or through nutrition. There will be a consequence further down the line. And that's now what we're seeing. The huge rise in developmental challenges, the huge rise in obesity, the huge rise in diabetes. There's a cause to this. It's not just unlucky. It's an unlucky period of time in the world. No, there's a cause to it.
Yeah.
And actually,
there's reasons to all this.
And there's a reasons to it. And actually, the amazing thing about this is that through what we do and people jumping on board and the amazing scientists around the world, we can change this. It's not fixed. Our children are not fixed. Seb spoke about it a few times now, neuroplasticity. The brain is plastic. It will evolve. It will change. It will get better if we fuel it correctly. It will get worse if we don't. There's lots of studies around going out and there was this guy who ate McDonald's for every day for 30 days. Well, funny enough, his body started falling apart internally because so there's a balance. There's treats. There's a time for a little bit of tech. There's a time for a sweet after school. But if it's only that and we're not moving, we're not socializing, we're not interacting, then there's a problem. So it's an amazing conversations to start to have.
I'm conscious that there's so many concepts and thoughts that we're talking about, and we're going to break all these down in detail. We have these conversations all the time.
Yeah.
So I think
I think
this
also
is about
on,
introducing it and then breaking it down as we go.
I think also on that one, Steve, where the body sort of lives in truth in a sense. So when you see someone who's nutritionally deficient, especially a child, you only need to look at their teeth, and you start to see now where dentists are saying the amount of kids now coming in with rotten teeth, and we're having to extract them, where that wasn't really the case 30 years ago. So the body is giving you signs in other ways, and you can see how it's almost wearing the body down much quicker than what it used to. And then also, what are the functions of the teeth in regards to breathing, let's say? The jaw position, and how does that then affect posture? But what I'm saying is there's always signs that the body gives you, and that's the consequences that you speak about if we don't get this right from the very start, because them children's habits are only going to develop and the trajectory remains the same. It doesn't get better on its own if we don't teach them well.
Interventions. Yeah, interventions are key. I think it'd be a good time to sort of touch on early childhood, toddlers, babies, milestones, these primitive reflexes that we've talked about that are the foundation or within the foundation of all our brains. And, talk a little bit about voluntary control and involuntary control, and what we're seeing in children, especially with the work you're starting to do in schools, Steve, and you're seeing a lot of children still have primitive reflexes active.
We've spoken about it a few times now around primitive reflexes. So this is why I love now doing what I do. So I've been involved, like I said, with children making the move in PE and sport for 30 years. However, what I didn't know for the first 20 years is about these primitive reflexes. So these primitive reflexes are basically the brain's survival mechanism, and they're a set of movements that basically put our babies in the right position within the womb. They help with the birthing process, and then they help with the first stages of life.
Yeah.
So without these reflexes, our children
They're
don't
involuntary.
survive. They're involuntary.
It's like
they happen.
Your heart beating,
absolutely.
Your blood pressure pumping around your
absolutely.
body. You breathe in. All of this stuff Mother Nature's given.
Absolutely. And we are given involuntary movements. Now, what we're now seeing at schools at 4, when our children are going to school at 4, these children still have lots of these primitive reflexes still active. They haven't switched off. So like Seb just mentioned, they need to switch off. And the only way they switch off is through play and movement and interaction with the floor, tummy time, back time, social interactions. Our babies blow raspberries with their lips. That's the reason. That's not just cute. That's every movement that a baby makes has a neurological reason. So these primitive reflexes are the first foundational movements that support our children. Now, they're amazing. They're there's a plane. Yeah, they're amazing in the fact that they just support. So we will know some of them. So if every parent will know this, if you put something in a baby's hand, what happens to that hand? It closes shut. Okay, that's a palmar reflex or the grass reflex.
And I'm the special daddy.
Exactly. So, but a baby then will. You'll then have to, when we all had hair when we were younger, if your baby grabs your hair, they're not letting go. So you then have to prise their fingers off. So a baby learns how to let go as opposed to hold. Now that palmar reflex is there for 2 reasons. One, for our babies to hold food, and more importantly, for our babies to hold mummy. They grab in and hold mummy, and that's a security blanket which also relates to one of our startle responses when our babies jump and then they close their arms and they hold on to mummy. So these reflexes are super crucial. They're
and maybe more important years gone by. Important nowadays
than years gone by.
Grabbing onto mum in the forest when there's danger and all that.
All that kind of stuff. Yeah, exactly.
They're encoded into us over years and years and years,
decades and generations and things like that. So these reflexes are so important that they have to switch off. So for me, getting a child ready, like Seb said, they need to be physically ready for school first. And the first part of that is switching off these reflexes. Now we're going into schools and I was recently in a school, and every child in the school, there was 97 children in the school, and every one of them still had reflexes still active from 4 to 10/11. everyone, from varying degrees. So some more active than others, but they're still active. That just shows that our children are not moving as much as they used to. So we then, the amazing thing, and this is what Seb's brought to me. So I'm involved in sport, and now I've got another dimension to my education going, actually, it's not just about football or rugby or producing a Johnny Wilkinson or a Roger Federer or whatever. It's about actually the movement is creating our children's long-term success in anything.
Yeah.
Whether that's academia, whether that's social interactions, whether that's sport, whatever. So school ready for me is, like saying, knocking out these reflexes, and that's done through movements. And that's now what we're doing in schools, giving them opportunities to play and do exercises to knock these reflexes out. It's called integrating, but actually we call them switching off. Switch these reflexes off. It's an easier kind of way to understand it. Switch these reflexes off. That will then support posture. That will then support sensory systems because, I don't know, for example, we'll talk about this on another episode. The ATNR reflex, it helps the baby crawl and movement and head control, but it's also linked to eyesight. So if the ATNR reflex is still active, then we might have eye tracking issues going on, which will then won't be very helpful with reading and writing and processing information. So like Seb mentions, there's a sequence of events that needs to happen. Now, again, going back to what's happened, we've moved away from movement with our babies. Everyone's seen it. We've seen babies in front of screens. And by the way, we don't blame parents at all. We've all done it. I've done it with my own children.
Yeah.
Can I just have half an hour? Yeah, they watch the screen. It keeps them quiet. Absolutely. However, but you do that en masse over a long period of time, it changes the development of our children. And that's now why we're seeing more challenges. And whether that's emotional, academic, coordination, social skills, it's happening.
It's a key point. And what you've seen with the stats in the schools is that there's a correlation between reflexes still being active and behavioural issues, developmental issues, social issues, etc., etc., etc.
Absolutely. And I think that's the biggest thing. And Seb doesn't like being told, well done, Seb, or anything, but that's the biggest thing that I've learned from Seb along the way is actually we've got to go back and get this right. And we've got to educate people around our children's brains are not just going to happen. We've got to put the information in and we've got to support that as adults and parents and teachers and family members and guardians and all this. But if we understand that movement's crucial, social interactions are crucial, nutrition is crucial, we can then start to build our children's brains more successfully, if that's a term you want to use.
Careful with the words, haven't we?
Yeah.
Healthy.
And by the way, we will always have different characters. We're never going to produce robots. That's why we're amazing as human beings. There's not one brain's that's the same. Depends how you rolled, how you sat up, how you crawled, how you jumped, what music was on. There's so many reasons how a brain develops, but there's evolutionary things that need to take place. Yeah. These reflexes there to make our children and support our children with survival, but they need to switch off. And then that develops a sensory system. And then as Seb talks about this a lot, we then see it in the postural system. So we can look at children now and guess that they've got X reflex still active just by how they're standing or how they're running or how their posture is, because you can see it. So there's a consequence to things. So this is why I think we'll get excited on these episodes along the way but it's not set. It's not fixed. So if little Billy has still got that palmar reflex still active, and every time you tickle their hands, they wiggle.
So for example,
we can knock that out.
My child's at school. She's been diagnosed with dyslexia. She struggles to read. She struggles to write. Yeah. You're telling me if she goes back, plugs in some of this information that maybe has been missed, switches off these reflexes, it should help with these specific disorders as well.
Absolutely.
Dyslexia.
Absolutely. We can. Well, this is where Seb will jump in.
Well, my daughter's gone through that, Steve. So basically, the head of year told her in junior school that high school will swallow her up because she used to get a B's and D's the wrong way around and things like that. The typical dyslexic sort of symptoms. And, that's when I started to delve in deeper. And can you imagine a child being told and parents of a child being told that you're going to be swallowed up in high school, and
you weren't having that label for it.
There's no point.
No parent wants that future for their child.
Absolutely. But if I was one of them parents who didn't want answers, rather than listen to someone who possibly believes that about her own life. Maybe she limits herself in her own life. I don't know. That's where opinions are. So that's all right. That's fine. I respect it. If that's what you believe, no problem. But I need more answers. And I said, could this get better? Oh, no, it's permanent. Well, my daughter passed all the GCSEs. And not only that, she got 2 A's and a B in her A levels, and she's off to university. So what I'm saying is the
Does
individuals
she
with
still get her P's
dyslexia,
and D's mixed up?
no, not at all. And she even says, I no longer have
So,
dyslexia. So,
what did
and
you
she
do to
loves
help
reading
her?
books.
For
Yeah, and she
parents
loves
out there, for parents out there that think their child might be dyslexic, their child's struggling
and
with
that's great.
academic.
That's great. We've
What?
got a good baseline. But
Yeah,
now let's find out what the brain needs. What is the
yeah.
gap that I've got to fill from where I am to where I want to
And
be?
what specific work did you do with Erin to help
Well,
her
Erin
overcome
missed Erin missed the crawling phase. So, like Steve spoke about, is the reflexes
Yeah.
had been these milestones had been missed, and most pediatricians and stuff there's still not enough emphasis on how important milestones are, but they are important if we're looking at it from a chronological and a developmental point of view, because the child is ready for learning if the reflexes integrate at the correct milestone. So it makes life a little bit easier at their start point. But even if they miss them like Erin did, there's still an opportunity to recognize that that is a gap from where she is to where she needs to be. And the gap is, well, we've got to start stimulating the ATNR reflex, and we test that. And then we test the STNR reflex, we test the TLR reflex. So these reflexes that we emphasize in BrainX. And what we then do is we look at the visual eye fields and we look at convergence, because eyes are used for reading. So if you've got a diverging left eye, well, that's also the same neural circuits that govern consequence processing, empathy, behavioral inhibition. But if you've got a diverging right eye, then you're going to lack the academic sort of logical thinking and sequencing planning and logical planning. So the symptoms reveal a lot. But if I did no eye tracking, nothing to improve convergence, then and stabilization within the visual eye fields, then just putting a different colored piece of paper is not preparing it for the world that requires it to be prepared for the world. And I think that's really important to understand. What systems do I need to upgrade in a sense?
Yeah.
And the brain's remarkable ability to do that is
When we talk
it
about it,
allows us to do that.
Interesting what you said about the paper, and that's masking symptoms and not.
We're treating and managing symptoms rather than preparing them, and
getting to the root
understanding
cause.
that they have the ability to have functioning of these skills they currently don't have full function of. So although they may pass the eye exam, but they're struggling to read, and that's a common case with individuals with dyslexia. So it's not just a simple case that I see, it's a simple case as, do your eyes track together? Yeah. And is it are they focused together? And that's when you combine the whole foundational brain development.
But there's one thing identifying the issues, which you've done there, but it's another thing to then know, and parents have no idea about this. I had no idea. The people have no idea. You can improve them. So you actually did eye exercises that improved all of the divergence and the convergence that you just talked about.
Well, it gave
the
eyes. Yeah, it gave the brain the ability to access the higher functions needed for academic setting. Because when you're 1, you don't really need to be reading.
So her brain wasn't faulty.
No, but that is the limitation. That's the current belief. And I only had one last year who was like head of sort of, it was some dyslexia organization, been working with kids with dyslexia, and they go really defensive when you say, but I have improved individuals with dyslexia who no longer meet the criteria for dyslexia.
Yeah.
And
and
and also it's almost looking at the brain from, even if you have been labeled with anything, is you got to question the ability to perform certain skills and how you got to be able to develop them skills. But at what point does the label limit an individual in developing these other skills they're currently immature in? I don't understand how a label prevents an individual who's currently immature in to prevent them from developing these skills. The label has no correlation with it.
I
Does
think
that make sense?
that's a normal concept for you, Seb, but that's not a normal concept for
most,
the
for the
everyday
masses,
man or woman
absolutely.
or masses, teachers,
Well, if a health
etc.
professional can,
it's not what we're told.
But if a health professional, and I've asked many, and every single one of them just say, "What a great question." But I said, even if my child was, had ADHD, at what point does it prevent the brain from developing these skills they're currently immature in? How does ADHD prevent an individual from developing these skills that they've been assessed on, which are just currently immature?
Mm.
And I think that's the crucial bit of all of it, Seb, isn't it?
That's
are
a good
limiting
question.
Yes. Yeah. And we are limiting our children and adults in, I have this. Even with my son, for example, I've already been told he's never going to be a wordsmith. Well, utter nonsense. Utter nonsense.
Absolutely.
He loves sport and he loves running around and he's great at it and things like that. But he's going to be sporty and not great at English.
They've already
Nonsense.
put him in a box.
They've already put him in a box because he's great at sport at the moment, so he's not going to be overly good at English. What utter nonsense. You can do both. He'll have to make that decision, but what he wants to do. But the brain has the ability to do what it wants to do.
And not only that, to judge a child like what happened with my daughter, to judge a child to believe that currently at the age of 7 they're not able to perform really well in English doesn't mean at 13 she's not going to perform well at English.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm a prime example of that, Seb.
Right.
I started my neuroscience journey at 36.
Yeah. So
before that, I was in kinesiology and movement and strength and conditioning and all that, but started the neuroscience at 36. So let's not say our children at 4 are set and fixed, shall we? Because we can learn
to just that.
Yes,
absolutely.
And we can learn.
But these are great questions.
Yeah.
And, this is possibly an opportunity for others who may think they have the answers, but I find it very hard with the modern research in neuroscience to explain how a child who's been labeled with no brain injuries, no brain pathologies, no brain damage, no genetic mutations, no chromosomal anomalies, and prevents them and limits them to not being able to do the things that they currently can't do. I just find it very hard to
And this is what this pod is all about.
This is what BrainX Movement's all about.
And this is what we can help and support and guide and give education, because we're in it. We've been in it. You're in it with your children. Both my children have done all the exercises and still do eye tracking exercises now, just because I know they're super important. They play catch, they've hit balloons, they do all these kind of things because it helps the brain develop.
The way I see this, it always resonates with me. You've described it this way: is your brain kind of thinks that you're still a baby in a way. If some of these primitive reflexes are still active,
still in survival mode.
Still thinks you're under 3.
Well,
absolutely.
Well, it still thinks you need the armbands to swim.
That's
and it still thinks you need the supporting wheels to ride a bike.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's the brain's doing its job. It's not nothing wrong with the brain.
The brain's job is to
because the brain's job is survival. That's the brain's job.
In the beginning, the armbands are essential to help the child before the child develops the coordination and the muscle strength and the skill to be able to swim without it. So they're helpful. That's what they're there for, is to help and support us reach the next level. But it does it in these rhythmic stages, these sequential stages. That's why they're crucial.
And it's crucial, and Seb's mentioned before, I can go back in at any stage. I can work with a 4-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 24-year-old, a 44-year-old, a 94-year-old that still has reflexes active. If you put the information in through movement patterns, you can switch them off.
Yeah.
So that's the amazing thing. And we spoke about neuroplasticity. So that's the amazing thing. It doesn't matter how old you are. You've just got to put the information in.
And it's important to understand that if they go and they're switched off, doesn't mean that they can't switch back on. And
Absolutely,
we'll address that.
Yeah. We'll address that on another day because
but they can't. They're not always dormant, are
No.
they? They can switch back.
But understand as well, dysfunctional foundations develop into dysfunction.
Explain.
Yeah, amazing.
So if you have
the functional foundation of the brain.
So there's no way, if the foundations are dysfunctional, anything you build on top of that is only going to lead to more dysfunction.
Yeah. And then we see it in postural problems.
Yeah.
So if primitive reflexes are active, the sensory system might be slightly out, and then the postural system's out.
Yeah.
And then all the others.
It's like you've got the foundations of the house all wrong.
Yeah.
And the house is on the skew.
If you build on top of the foundations of dysfunctional foundation of a house, then we know eventually it's going to topple over. The car, anything. The foundations are crucial. You've got to align the tires, the engine, the pistons, suspensions. The chassis has to be aligned well before you put the engine in.
And that's why, maybe ending on the thought that the education part of this is key.
Crucial.
Because none of us, neuroscience is scary, right? None of us want to get involved.
It's deep.
When you were like, read this book and read that book and understand it. But actually, it is like being given the keys to a car without being given the manual or the lessons to drive
put
it.
The fuel in.
We're just growing our brains without knowing the right way to do it.
And this is where within schools
you put
now,
shit in, you're going to get shit out.
Yeah,
in a crude way of saying it.
Yeah. But we're seeing that in schools now, and head teachers are super receptive to this information. Seb's seeing it up in Sheffield, and us further south in the country. Our head teachers and deputy heads and people within schools are going, wow, we need this, and they want this information because they're seeing a challenge within schools more so now than ever before.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's crucial. Do you know when people say, well, now we're able to test better? Absolutely, I get that. But you can't explain at the alarming rate that this is going, that teachers who have been in the teaching industry for over 20 years are saying this is remarkably worse.
Like, and that's everywhere,
without a doubt. I think it's ubiquitous.
And that's why it's important that they just don't have the supply. They're at a loss. They don't really know what to do anymore because managing isn't doing it. The child doesn't have the ability to regulate or learn. The whole purpose of the school is to allow that child to reach a milestone or a grade that they are responsible for. But how can they do that when the child doesn't have these foundational skills yet? Physically, emotionally, behaviorally, the child can never learn in an academic setting. They're not ready for it. No. But then teachers are battling with that and they're just going, we just need some answers. This BrainX makes sense. Well, give us an opportunity to explain how it makes sense, and just the work we're currently doing in schools, and hopefully, people start to embrace this more rather than limiting themselves and going, no, it's because of this. That's why they can't do this, because now you're only managing. And when that child gets to 20 years old, he's going to have a very, very difficult life, possibly. And it's not a life you really
We're noticing, and you're noticing when you're out there in schools, people are ready for this information.
Yeah,
people,
absolutely.
More than ever, information's at our fingertips, but it's like a time of enlightenment for personal development and health, and everyone's reading books, everyone's writing books, and finding out these therapies and treatment programs is not hard. Every parent I talk to that has got a problem with their child, they might not know about what we're talking about specifically, but they might know about something else.
They're searching for some
impact. So it's like, what about mold? What about metals, vaccines,
toxins,
chiropractor work? So people are understanding that there's something that can be done about this, but I think it's about wrapping it all up, and the education is key. And I think that's what we're going to keep focusing on over the coming weeks.
I know you've got other options, just other than just the pill.
Oh, man,
because everything is now just the pill.
We'll get into that, masking the symptoms and the farmers and all that. But it's been an amazing conversation, guys. Every conversation I have with you two is enlightening, and I enjoy it greatly, and hopefully the audience has enjoyed it as well. We'll do this again next week.
Awesome.
But thanks for your time, and we'll wrap it up there, I think, unless you've got any
Absolute
closing.
pleasure, Steve. Great to see you both.
All right,
Well done,
Seb.
Seb. Amazing. Cheers,
Cheers,
Steve.
guys.
See you soon.
Bye.
Take care.